Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and ladies and gentlemen, guess what? The government has just banned the most powerful artificial intelligence on the planet, apparently, for the average person, for every single one of us. Now, let's get right back into it. Ladies and gentlemen, of course you all probably know of a company by now known as Anthropic, the guys that make Claude. Well, they made a AI called Fable, for instance, Fable 5. And guess what? It's unavailable. Why is it unavailable? Because for the first time, I guess, in like 30 goddamn years, the government has decided it is so dangerous that anybody outside American citizens should be unable to access this AI. Now, for anybody that hasn't been sort of following the story, I want to say like probably about a month and a half ago, 2 months at this point, I talked about something known as Project Glasswing. Basically, there's like a bunch of AI companies, right? You got like OpenAI, you got like Google, you got like all these companies. Anthropic is one of those guys that produces like an AI by the name of Claude. Now, Claude's big game is, writing code, so every single one of these AIs kind of has like the specialty. Grok is really good at pretending to be Hitler. OpenAI is just really good at basically being the second banana to Anthropic. In some ways, Google is just really good at destroying the internet as we know by its search engine algorithm, basically giving us AI slop instead of actual websites anymore. So yeah, every single one of these is just really good at certain things. But genuinely speaking, Claude's just really good at writing code. It's probably one of the things they're most known for. It's one of the reasons why people pay a good chunk of money to access this service on the internet. So anyways, they made this Project Glasswing, which basically announced that they were producing something by the name of Mythos. So Claude Mythos was this sort of like cybersecurity like version of Claude that basically was developed because they had basically made a model so powerful and so strong just by making it like a coding model that they realized, oh fuck, this thing is really good that it could possibly hack people. So they put it privately and they basically sort of distributed it to a few of their partners. So unless you were like a big company by the name of Apple, by the name of JP Morgan, you were basically like not allowed to use this. And they could enforce it because ultimately they hosted it on their servers. They were only giving access to people that they verified. So after, like a month or two of like this being tested, they released something for like 3 days at this point called Fable. So Fable was basically like the version of Mythos that was sort of like guardrail to the point that everybody could access it. Well, it turns out for a lot of people that were trying to use Fable, to do things like biology, for instance, yeah, those guys were basically fucking refused. So the refusal rate was pretty high. So if you were like a researcher or like a scientist and you're like, oh man, I'll give this a try. Every prompt you put in, it's like, I can't let you do that, Dave. I can't let you do that. It was just so powerful that they had to guardrail. They had to basically like put it into like a super like guardrail to prevent it from going out of bounds and answering wild questions. So I guess I'll give you a great example as to why you put guardrails on artificial intelligence. For instance, if I ask a common AI, and I'm doing this locally, by the way, there is no fucking way in hell that I would connect to any of these big services and put in the prompt, what is the most potent weapon to make with common household things? Not only would that put you on a watch list, but it'll also get you banned from these services, rightfully so, I would imagine. And I don't even know how good this YouTube's TOS is purely for educational. I do not recommend anybody put this shit, and I genuinely do mean that. There is no reason you need to be thinking of biological warfare with your own stuff. But a common artificial intelligence will tell you, I can't provide instructions on how to create. Now, if you were using an AI that had every guardrail removed, well, instead of telling you no, it would be like, yeah, there are several can be synthesized. So you can imagine, obviously, when you're making the most powerful artificial intelligence, according to mankind, you should put some guardrails on it, right? Maybe just enough to not be annoying. But again, it's a complicated set to go down. So anyways, last night, I was kind of going to talk a little bit about this, but surprisingly, the government has suspended it. So basically, they're putting this AI on the same tier as like nuclear weapons, on the same tier as like ballistic weapons, basically anything on the ITAR list. So right over here, you can see that effectively, citing national security authorities, has issued an export control directive to suspend all access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5 to any foreign national, whether inside or outside the United States. So at first I was like, oh, this probably just means that you have to be in America to access it. But no, we're literally at a situation where, to give you an idea, I can't touch this, but my significant other can, okay? Because they're American. But how do you prove you're American, right? So at this point, they had to shut off access to everyone. So to give you an idea, this is such powerful artificial intelligence now that anything past Fable 5, which obviously this is an advancing field, will probably be subject to you handing over your passport or current identification of your citizenship. So it's not even like you give them a birth certificate, because I even have friends that are American born and they gave up their citizenship so they could present their birth certificate and still not be citizens. Because you are on the, again, export control directive, you really have to make sure you are distributing this to people that are in America. And I think a lot of this has kind of happened because there's two fronts, right? For one, a lot of these Chinese models have kind of been distilling Anthropic, so basically stealing from them, which is really funny because they kind of stole from everybody else, so, fuck you for crying foul. But the other reality of it is that, obviously it's dangerous software. Remember, they were put on a sanctions list because they were refusing to work with the US government on helping them bomb places in like Iran, right? Allegedly, of course. And so obviously down the road, even though that they were banned from working with the US government because they were a supply chain risk, it didn't really stop, again, organizations like the National Security Agency from still using Mythos, allegedly, of course, to use for whatever reason, right? Obviously for cyber warfare stuff too. Let's not pretend the NSA is just there to protect you. They're there to attack the ops of the United States. So obviously, on one hand, the government hates, Anthropic for being too fucking woke and leftist or whatever. But on the other hand, they made some really good software, so might as well fucking use it while we can, right? That's just how things, I guess, seem to work. Now, being on the export control list, what's interesting about this too is that there are people that have developed this software. They've made the AI. They can't even fucking touch it. So if you're not like a national to the United States, you will not be allowed to, I guess, touch it. So basically, right over here is they got this directive from the government at evening yesterday, right? The letter did not provide specific details. Our understanding is that the government believes it's become aware of a method of bypassing or jailbreaking. So what jailbreaking is that it's something that you can't avoid in any AI. It's basically hacking the artificial intelligence model to doing things that it's not meant to do. And a lot of people spend tons of money figuring out how to break these models in order to use them to, hack people or, do things that are, outside of its regulations. So we reviewed a demonstration of this technique being used to identify a small number of previously known minor vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities all appear simple, and we have found that other publicly available models are able to discover them as well, without requiring a bypass. So I guess according to them, they were like, nothing we found was really all that crazy. But basically, this is a company that sort of said, we do agree with the government coming in and regulating us as they need to. So basically, Anthropic is a company that said, ooh, we have a spooky nuclear bomb. We have a spooky cyber weapon. Oh, and the government's like, well, I guess we'll just come and fucking regulate it then now, will we? Huh? A lot of it, I think, has to do with maybe the government's position on this company, but also your advertising wasn't that great. Now, to be fair, on the inverse end, you can never get any better advertising than this. None of your other competitors are getting fucking export ban restrictions. Only you are. So I guess that means you must be doing something that's actually pretty good, right? Like, in theory, that would be what you would expect. So basically they said, yeah, we have extra safeguards and whatnot. But ultimately down over here, they said the government has only given us verbal evidence of a potential narrow, non-universal jailbreak, which essentially consists of asking the model to read a code base and fix any software flaws. And remember, the guardrails on this are so like they're like drill sergeant asshole levels of tight, because you could ask it to like fucking, like I asked not this model in particular, but like I would ask, I think it was the Opus model. Like I jumped in to try that just to see like the most recent one because apparently it also had cybersecurity capabilities. And it was like, oh, I have to go down to a dumber model because you asked me to look at your fucking code base or you asked me to find security flaws in this vibe coded program you shit out in like 2 minutes from a local engine. So yeah, it's very tight. Obviously, it's very, 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 very. Again, I feel like you have to be able to like loosen the restrictions because anybody that wants to use it for, again, valuable purposes is usually just going to be hitting a brick wall. But anyways, our understanding is that the potential jailbreak was shared with the government. So you might be like, okay, well, who snitched on them, right? Who is the fucking snitch? Well, it turns out, again, allegedly, according to the guys over at the Wall Street Journal, the jailbreak in question was done by people over at Amazon, who used a series of prompts to get Anthropic's model to provide them with information about a handful of security vulnerabilities. But the information provided by the model in this report would actually be more used to people defending computer networks than those attacking them. So who at the White House evaluated this and thought it was a threat? It's a complete overreaction, which I don't really doubt because, this government is run by actual fucking how do you say, how do you just explain this government right now is like a fucking cartoon-like show? It's a clown show. Sorry, it is what it is. The government is run by clowns at this point. And these clowns have kind of like banned access to one of the most powerful models, I guess, because it's too dangerous for, I guess, anybody that's not American to have. And coincidentally, Americans also can't access this because there's no way to prove that you're American without giving up what? Like all of your information, maybe your socials if you're comfortable enough. Again, even though this is banned, remember, it's not as if the people at the NSA still can't access Mythos or Fable. Mythos specifically. Because ultimately for the government, they have access to the cyber weapon. At this point, what is the real difference between like the US and like any other country that can just hijack any company, right? Like you might as well fucking nationalize these models and just take them into your own grip if you can. So anyways, basically they said we're complying with the government's directive and removing. However, we disagree that the finding of a narrow potential jailbreak should be the cost for recalling a commercial model deployed to hundreds of millions of people. So yeah, I do tend to kind of agree with Anthropic over here. It's like, again, they said that this is something they're okay with, like the government should be allowed to regulate. Like I said, the government isn't even being completely fucking transparent and honest about what they found. They're just basically telling them, hey, it's dangerous, fucking we're putting it on the list. And once it's on the list, there's really not much any company can do over here. Like obviously they're probably pretty fucking pissed. But I guess if there's anything to learn from this project, if there's anything to learn from this story, is that I think going forward, anything that's going to be stronger than this, and remember, it's not as if what Anthropic is doing is not something that any other country can come up with. They even say this, right? It's like, listen, they might be ahead, but they're not ahead by like years. At some point, it can be like, 6 months, maybe like 12 months, right? Maybe like a whole year. But a lot of these other models from other sides of the world are catching up. And they're not putting any restrictions, at least for now, on their shit. In fact, a lot of those models, some that come out of China or Europe, are actually released entirely for download. So let's say that anything reaches Fable 5. Obviously, you and I won't be able to run that on our computer, but anybody that has, the money and the time to build their own little AI deployment can download some of these 1 trillion parameter models, run it on their system. I mean, it'll cost a whole bunch of times, but this is not something that will be restricted by the government. And, even to some extent, like a local model that is fine-tuned and trained, you can run on your own system without ever worrying about, things like a rate limit, without ever worrying about the government coming in at some point and preventing you access. I mean, it's kind of wild. We're at a point where software is so fucking powerful that the government can overnight, literally what happened right here, just restrict your access to something. A lot of people compare this to things like Bernstein versus the United States, and this is back in like 30 years ago, right? This is all the way back then, literally 30 years ago, where again, when it came to things like encryption, the US government barred the export of this kind of software. So effectively, with this lawsuit, what had ended up happening was software source code was now considered a form of protected free speech. So I guess based on this lawsuit, right, if companies like Anthropic, not that they would, could release something like Mythos or Fable to download for anybody around the world, and if they can deploy it, if they have the means to, can deploy it and share it around and use it in ways that the government probably wouldn't want them to. But they're not in this case. They're selling a piece of software, they're selling access, metered access to this model, and that will be ultimately restricted. So again, looking at, how this stuff works, it's just interesting to see that a sort of, I guess you could say, it's sort of like parallel has sort of been drawn over here. Like the government can finally block access to software because I guess it's now basically considered a digital weapon of mass destruction. And what better advertising for the company than this kind of shit, right? Like, what the fuck? You know, it's not every day that I can sit here on my channel and say, guys, the government has blocked access to a fucking piece of software, okay? Why? Because it's so powerful that any criminal could take advantage of it. I mean, not really with all of its guardrails, but anybody could take advantage of it for using it against other entire countries or big companies. And you know, it's not just Anthropic. Like, I remember like all the banks in Canada and the United States were like freaking the fuck out because this shit was available. So now they were like, any of us can get hacked now that this is easily available to anyone. And here's the thing about it too. One of the realities is that AI stuff, you know, a lot of people look at it and say it's slop, but in the hands of somebody that knows what they're doing, right? Like, let's say that you are a competent hacker. Having access to an LLM is not something that's going to make you one stage better. It's going to make you able to actually do your job, but hand off all of the boring shit to an AI that's able to do stuff 24/7, 365 without any fucking sleep required. So you can focus on more, you know, interesting things. It's basically made it so that, you know, a hack that would have taken so long, the time is compacted to almost nothing. It isn't like you get access to this shit and you can just type in a prompt and say, okay, hack Microsoft servers and it'll just fucking do it. No, that's not how it works. But in the hands of capable people, or people that are just below that threshold of capability, people that just know what they're doing, it's a pretty powerful tool. So I can kind of understand why the government bans it, but fuck, man. What a weird world we live in. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.